This episode is sponsored by USA Girl Scouts Overseas. For families on the move, Girl Scouts is a constant, allowing girls to pick up right where they left off, benefiting from the single best leadership development experience for girls in the world. Their virtual troop is a great way for girls to learn new skills, meet girls from all over the world, and have fun no matter where they are or where they move. You can learn more at usagso.org. USA Girl Scouts Overseas. Welcome to Milspouse Matters, the podcast dedicated to encouraging military spouses. I'm your host, Jen McDonald, and I was a military spouse for nearly 30 years until my husband's retirement. I'm now the mom of 4 young adults, including 1 active duty son. I also wrote the book, You Are Not Alone, Encouragement for the Heart of a Military Spouse. Through my experiences, I came to believe that we're only stronger together. Whatever life is throwing your way as a military spouse, let's talk about it. So hi, everybody, and welcome to episode 82. This is Jen, and I'm so glad you're joining me today and catching up a little bit. I have been out of pocket for the past few weeks, and I'm just catching up. If you follow me on social media, you know I've been in Ireland and the UK. My daughter was dancing at the Irish Dancing World Championships in Belfast, which she did incredibly, and it was a great experience. But boy, we're tired. Traveling seems to do that, but I'm hoping to get caught back up and get back to my schedule of putting out a podcast episode at least every other week, if not more often. Lots of fun stuff coming up. And speaking of traveling, I wanted to mention I haven't done the Jen's favorite things for a few episodes, but I got a book from a fellow writer to review, and I did not realize how extensive it would be, but it's called Your Guide to the National Parks, and I'm going to be reviewing it on my site, so be looking for that. But as we head into travel and PCS season, if you are a family that likes to make some stops along the way, this book is just absolutely incredible. It breaks up all the parks, not just by state, but by ranking. And he has actually visited every single park and interviewed lots of park rangers and has all the inside scoop. And you know, if you're a military family, you can usually get a discount on your national park pass. I believe that depends on the state, but I would just take a look at that. I know that you are entitled to a discount if you're military or veteran. You can usually get in a little more cheaply if you like camping or just if you want to stop in and take a break and visit one of our beautiful national parks across the country. So it's written by Michael Oswald, and it has tons of beautiful photos and lots of great information. So that's my favorite thing this week. So I was just so shocked at how incredible this book is. It's over 700 pages, and he's selling it for only $28, which seems like quite the bargain to me, because he's got tons of photos and, like I said, lots and lots of information. So check that out. It is called Your Guide to the National Parks. So this week, I decided to go ahead and release the second talk of the book study of my book, You Are Not Alone, Encouragement for the Heart of a Military Spouse, that we've been doing in the private Christian Military Spouses Facebook group. So just like the last episode, this was recorded on Facebook, so you may hear some rustling of book pages and notice a little bit difference in sound from my normal recordings. But I thought, we're going to go ahead and keep pushing these out. I believe we're on week 8 in the group, so these are coming out after the fact. And if you want to join us, just pop over to Facebook and join us. Ask to join the Christian Military Spouses Facebook group, and we'll get you right in after you answer the questions to make sure that you're a military family. And we have about not quite 1,000 members. It's really growing, and it's a great community. We take prayer requests, we share, and I think if you're looking for that kind of support, please join us. So this week, we're going to be covering the topics of discontentment, comparisons, and admitting when we need help. And those will be days 5 to 7 in the book. If you don't have the book, I will drop a link. You can get the new updated 2022 edition. If you have the first edition from 2016, that works fine as well. It's available on Kindle and Nook, print, and pretty soon, audio. Really excited about doing that. That will be coming out hopefully this summer. And so there's lots of ways for you to download and read or listen to the book. And thank you to all of you who have bought the book and are leaving reviews. It's so helpful and it helps it keep it in front of other people that can use it. As you know, this is definitely a labor of love that I wrote a few years back, just revised, and it's just sort of my gift to other military spouses to hopefully encourage them. So speaking of, here are a couple of recent reviews. The first one is from Kate, and she says, short, sweet, and helpful. I got this book as a gift before my husband left for OSUT. I am so thankful for it. Reading a little bit every day helped put my mind at ease about the new adventure my husband and I are embarking on with the military. I love that it inspired me to strengthen my faith in the Lord and minimize the problems that I kept focusing on. Please read this book if you feel uncertain or anxious about being or becoming a military spouse. You will feel so much encouragement and excitement about you and your spouse's future. Thank you, Kate, for that awesome review. I really appreciate that. And the next one is from Kroot, and it says, a must-have and read. I received this book as a gift on Valentine's Day from my mother-in-law, who is also a Milspouse. I didn't think I would need this book, but just a few months into our deployment, and this is just what I needed. I enjoy taking a few moments before bed to read one chapter a night and reflect. I love that this is a mix of stories, scripture, and reflection. So thank you, Groot, for leaving that review. I just truly, truly appreciate you taking the time. Anybody that's leaving a review there or on iTunes or, Apple or Spotify now has the ability to do reviews as well. So it means a lot. It helps me so much, and it helps me know, what you guys need and whether or not things that I am doing are resonating with you. So thank you for taking your time to do that. One question I often get is, do you have to be religious to read this book? And so while this book is written from the perspective of a Christian military spouse, I think there's so much that can pertain to any military spouse. The themes of moving, of restarting, of feeling isolated, deployment, all those things, they're common to all military spouses. Of course, it does have faith added. If that doesn't help you, you can take it or leave it. But I do think that the stories and the tips could help you. So I hope that you'll stay tuned, even if you're not a Christian. This will just be a short episode going through the book and talking about the themes I mentioned, discontentment, and especially admitting when we need help. That is a hard one, right? So I hope you grab your favorite beverage, find a comfy spot, and just consider this a visit between me and you. I want this to feel like we're having coffee together or whatever you like. Or if you need to listen on the go, that is fine too, because I totally get that busy military spouse life. It's family friendly. You can listen into the car with your kids. So thank you again for listening, interacting. There are lots of exciting things coming up, like some plans for a community forum that's not based on social media. So that is a work in progress. I have lots of fun things this spring and summer that hopefully will be rolling out. So stay tuned. And thanks for bearing with me again through this crazy spring schedule where I've kind of been absent, that I hope will be getting better very, very soon. Also, one last thing before we get into today's talk is I have a listener Q&A coming up, and I have put it out on my social media and in the Facebook group. If you have any questions that you're wanting to ask, or just something you need some insight on pertaining to military life, or you'd just like to know more about me, I have done a few of these in the past. They're super fun. I think on one of them, somebody asked me what hairspray I used, and I'll answer it, as long as it's keep it G, of course. If there's something you're curious about, I was a military spouse for 30 years. My husband has been retired now for 5 years this spring, which is absolutely crazy to me. My son is also in the military. He's active duty Air Force. And I still work for a military-oriented company, Military by Owner Advertising, and do a lot with other military organizations. So if there's something that you would like to ask, please do. You can send me a note at jen@jenmcdonald.net or drop me a line on Instagram or Facebook. For whatever reason, Facebook, sometimes I'm not seeing the messages there until weeks later. I don't know what the deal is with that. So probably Instagram or email is your best bet if you're trying to reach me. So I would love to hear your questions. So please reach out and you may be included on an upcoming episode. All right, friends, I hope you have a great week wherever in the world this finds you. And let's get into today's talk on You Are Not Alone, Encouragement for the Heart of a Military Spouse, days 5 to 7. everybody, and welcome to week 2 of our study of my book, You Are Not Alone, Encouragement for the Heart of a Military Spouse. Thanks to everybody that joined in last week. It was so great to hear from you and hear your insight and all your great discussion. I really, really appreciate you taking your time to do that. So this week we are going to be covering days 5 to 7 because I decided that days 5 to 9 was just going to be too much. So I think the study is just going to take as long as it takes. I was planning on 2 months. We might go a little bit longer, but in some weeks we may do more than I intended. But I just felt like this week that was going to be too much to try to cover. So I'm here in Washington State visiting my son and his family. I was a military spouse for over 30 years, and I'm also the mom of an active duty son. Some of you may not know that. So they are here on a base, and I'm in their little home. My daughter-in-law does such a good job making it a welcoming and really cute home for them. And so enjoying my time here with them. I'm recording this on Valentine's Day, so I hope that you had a great one. And if you weren't able to be with the one that you love, I hope that you still felt special and know that you are loved by God and all of us. So let's jump right into it. This week, we're talking about the themes of discontentment and comparing ourselves to others, and sometimes also not admitting when we need help. Last week, we talked about making peace with military life and finding our identity in Christ. So I think there's a lot of corollaries with this week as well that kind of all relates, obviously. But getting into unfair comparisons, I think it can be tempting at times to compare ourselves to those that aren't in the military life and start to feel like that old jealousy rear its ugly head. Like I remember when my kids were little, we couldn't go on a date. I didn't know anybody. I couldn't leave my kids with just anybody. And knowing people that had their grandparents living nearby or all this extended family, it was hard. And I remember that feeling very well. Or just as the years went by, the relationships with extended family or things that we missed, that I felt like we were missing out on. So on page 21, it says, when comparing military to civilian life, the grass is always greener mentality can take over. Your friends may have grandparents nearby, their spouse doesn't regularly travel, or they may seem to have more stability overall. Is there anything that can help when, like me, you find yourself slipping into the comparison mindset? While it may seem logical to tell yourself simply don't compare, there are some days it's easier to do this than others. On page 20, I might have my notes over here. On page 27, I talk about giving up control and my story of what I call hammering the scorpion. If you didn't read it, I hope you'll read it. But realizing how little control I had over anything in my life. And I think military life definitely brings that lesson home very quickly. On page 27, I reached a point where I realized that my futile attempts at controlling my life, where we lived, our schedule, and even how a given day would go were just that, futile. Maybe you've reached that point in your own life. Perhaps it's something entirely different, and you think battling a few scorpions would be a piece of cake in comparison to what you're dealing with. There are no quick fixes when it comes to surrendering your life to God's will and being okay with His answers, even if it's not what you'd prefer. I'm still walking through this, and I imagine I will be as long as I live. There are a few things I try to practice and remind myself as I work to loosen my tight grasp over circumstances I cannot control. I go over some suggestions for you to learn to give up control. I hope you'll go over those. One of the things is finding joy in the small things. I think it's so important to every day take a moment and find one thing to be grateful for, even if it's the smile of your child or spouse or your cup of coffee or a warm home or a roof over your head, because they may seem small, but those aren't small to people. Those aren't small things to people that don't have them. So we need to remember that and not take them for granted. On page 33, so this next day is talking about being independent and not wanting to identify as weak and not wanting to identify as needing help. And I wonder if some of you have been there too, because I think we can get caught up in that where we think we get a medal for having it the toughest, for our deployment is the toughest, we had the worst move ever, we've been through so much. And I think it's very discouraging to newer or younger spouses because they don't feel like they can speak up and admit that they are having trouble. And it doesn't do us any good either, because we're great and we're strong until we're not. And that sounds obvious, but there is going to come a point where every one of us is going to need help. On page 33, here's a reminder for you. It's no shame to admit you need a breather, whether it's hiring a sitter for a few hours. I love the sound of aircraft going over. I think it's a helicopter again. Because I miss that. We used to live on base for years and years, so I don't get to hear this as much. So whether it's hiring a sitter for a few hours or snatching a nap when possible, it's important to build in time alone and be proactive versus reactive. Some of us need to have time with friends. Others must have quiet to recharge. There's no reward for not caring for yourself while your spouse is gone. Remember that. So before we get into the verses and questions for this week, and we'll tie all this together in just a minute because it does all relate. But one thing I've been hearing from a lot of you is that you're having difficulty connecting. I hear this from listeners from my podcast, from people on social media, from this group, and finding difficulty making connections and finding community. And my kids are all in their 20s and 30s, and I've talked to several of them lately, and we all agree that one of the best things to come out of COVID was, there's so many ways to connect online. There's so many ways to meet people and connect in ways that we wouldn't have thought possible, and having things kind of slow down and being at home more. But one of the worst things that I believe has come about because of COVID is we've all gotten used to not being in church. And just, I think it's amazing that we have live stream church and we have these opportunities that if we are not able to get to church or we're sick, or for people that are older that can't get to church, they can still, attend church. But I think it's important, especially in this military life, if we've gotten used to not going to church, we need to get ourselves back, because that is where we're going to find our local community. That's where we're going to find support and friends. And it's just so important. So that is my reminder to you, as I think I'm older than most of you. So that's my little reminder, like, get your behind in the pew and get back to your church community if you're not in there. And that's, I think, applies to all of us, doesn't it? So we want to talk about gratitude, acceptance, and seeking community. And those things will all help us with giving up control, comparing, because if we're grateful, we don't worry about what other people have or do. If we accept, then we don't feel like we have to control everything or prove that we're strong. And if we find community, that helps with all of these things, because we're not just struggling through life alone. So real quick, I'm really trying to be mindful of the time this week, and not so that you can watch this and not have it take up too much of your day. Page 23, I wanted to read you some verses. 1 Timothy 6:6-8. But godliness with contentment is great gain, for we brought nothing into the world and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we will be content with that. On page 29, Hebrews 4:15 and 16. This is such a good reminder. For we do not have a high priest who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way, just as we are, yet he did not sin. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. And he's always there, ready and willing with whatever our need is, even if it seems small. And on page 34, John 14:27, peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled and do not be afraid. And that is so comforting, because you don't have to figure it out. You don't have to fast forward and worst case scenario every situation. You can trust in God because he has got it under control. Isn't that great? So some questions for this week. First off, I would love for you to share if there's anything in days 5 through 7 that stood out to you, that really spoke to you, that made you think. I would love to hear that. The second question would be, tell me some ways, or share with us some ways that you will consciously cultivate contentment. Say that 5 times fast. Consciously cultivate contentment this week. Which ways are you looking for to make sure that your focus is on gratitude and being contented with where God has you? And I know it's a tough one, especially if you're in a spot you really don't want to be, or you're facing a situation that you're not liking. So share with us, how are you going to work through that with God's help? And then on page 23, is there a particular area of your life you find yourself comparing to others, which then causes you to feel discontented? What is it? on page 29 question. Like I said before, we're not going to do every single question in the group. It just would take too much time. Feel free to do them on your own for sure, but these will be the ones we discuss in the group. So what little thing, and it may not be a little thing, are you having a hard time trusting God with, and what actions can you take this week to relinquish control over it? Feel free to share if that's something you just want to work through on your own. That is perfectly fine. And on page 34, this is back to the whole independent thought. Is there a circumstance you're struggling with that requires help beyond what you can do alone? What steps will you take today to get practical help for your situation? And I found that as years went on as a military spouse, I had a very hard time asking for help. I wanted to prove I could do it alone. So if you're in that situation and you need help, admit it and figure out what resources you have available to you locally, or if there's a military benefit you need to take advantage of, like counseling or something like that for you or your family, or something practical. If it's just that you need somebody to mow your lawn or help you with snow shovel or whatever it is you need, that you can hire, a neighborhood teen or something. Ease the load on yourself. You don't have to do it all by yourself. And if you're doing fine, if there's someone you know who could use a helping hand right now. So think about that. Look around you and see. It's a great way to make connections and just kind of support each other. I hope that you guys have an amazing week. I can't wait to hear from you and hear your thoughts about this week's readings and the questions. And again, thanks for joining me, and I will talk to you next week, friends. Bye. Thanks for listening to the Milspouse Matters podcast. Connect with me at jen-mcdonald.com, where you can find a free deployment devotional and other resources, or on social media as @Milspouse Matters. You can find my book, You Are Not Alone, Encouragement for the Heart of a Military Spouse, on Amazon and other booksellers. Love the show? Please leave a 5-star review in whatever podcast player you're listening, and then share it with someone else who could use it too. Until next time, remember, you are brave, you are strong, and you've got this.